There's always a lot of craziness and things going on at the start of a hockey season, especially when it's the first one in franchise history. But for the Kraken, there was nothing super wild about this game. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where we have the first back-to-back wins in Seattle Kraken history. After having beaten the Montreal Canadiens on Tuesday, the Kraken come back on Thursday night and take care of business against the Minnesota Wild. Now, I say take care of business, but this game against the Wild looks to be the toughest test that the Kraken were going to have in this first ever homestand. Certainly, it was the team of the four they're going to play that had the highest expectations coming into the season. And with them entering this game 5-1 and 3-0 on the road, there was definitely reason to think that this was maybe going to be a tough one for Seattle to come out on top of. Fortunately for the Kraken, though, they are able to carry momentum from that win on Tuesday against the Habs into this one and win again 4-1. Before the game can even get started, though, we already have another first in franchise history, as for the first time at a Kraken home game, they don't unveil a banner before the game gets started. But once the game does get started, it looks pretty good for the Kraken, at least defensively, right out of the gate. Now, play is pretty back and forth, but they're being pretty aggressive at holding the line and not allowing easy entrances into their defensive zone. Minnesota is coming with a lot of pressure, though, and I would say is probably getting the best of possession early on, even if it was still a pretty close game in the first few minutes. Eventually, though, even with the defense continuing to play pretty soundly, a mixture of a relentless Minnesota attack and some sloppy transitioning and passing from the Kraken does allow the Wild to get and maintain possession in the Kraken defensive zone. And while at first they're able to keep the puck mostly to the outside, the Wild definitely have Seattle on their heels, and a pretty pass from Kaprizov at 6.5 minutes in finds Hartman in front of the net, and there's not much Grubauer can do about this one. It's just a nice play by Kaprizov, and it finds the back of the net. It's 1-0 Wild early on. And then quickly off the ensuing faceoff, it's bing bam boom, the puck goes off Foligno and it's into the net, and it's 2-0 Wild just like that. But wait, even as the Wild are celebrating the second goal in just a few seconds, the call on the ice is actually no goal for kicking. And as it goes to review, it is pretty clear that Foligno does kick the puck into the net. Of course, Kraken fans, after that first game against Vegas, are not holding their breath on this one. Fortunately, though, the refs do actually manage to get this one right. It comes back from replay, and the call on ice is held up. It's no goal. So Seattle gets to take a deep breath and relax for a second as they dodge a bullet on this one. And although this goal really doesn't look all that different from that game-winning one in Vegas that was held up as a good goal, the refs do actually manage to get this one right, and it stays 1-0 Wild. And the Kraken are able to actually use this a little bit to their advantage and even out and maybe even turn the momentum of the game in their favor. But the refs also managed to even things out a little bit with a good call evened out by a bad call, as the Kraken's first breakout into the offensive zone leads to a pretty questionable goaltender interference call on Seattle, as Bastian gets sent to the box after having been clearly pushed into Talbot. But either way, we're going to the penalty kill. The good news, though, is that the Kraken penalty kill continues to be one of the bright spots of this team, and once again they do their job here. Not just killing off the penalty, but actually maintaining that swing and momentum in the Kraken favor. And once the penalty is done, they're able to get and maintain possession of the puck in the offensive zone and get things set up. It does have to be said, though, that it takes them a little while to get some chances in the offensive zone, as the passing continues to be a bit of an issue for them early on, really having trouble getting those tape-to-tape passes to create opportunities in front of the net. Luckily for Seattle, however, one such mispassing attempt from Schwartz trying to find Alexiak crossing on the other side of the net is just a little bit too far ahead of the big rig and ends up bouncing off the sideboards. It does, however, find Fleury's stick sitting right in the middle of the blue line, and he decides to take the shot himself and buries it to tie up the game. It's 1-1, and for Fleury, his first goal in a Kraken uniform. Assists on the goal go to Donskoy, his 5th of the season already, and he would get his 6th later in the game. And Schwartz, who, again, probably wasn't trying to get this one to Fleury, but whatever works. And after that first goal from Fleury, the Kraken are able to maintain that pressure and momentum that they had built up, spending most of the rest of the first period with possession and in Minnesota's end of the ice. Thanks to Talbot, though, we will make it to the first intermission, still tied 1-1. But with the Kraken coming onto a 4-minute power play to start the second period, as the first period ends with a high sticking that draws blood from Donskoy. So it really was a good first period from the Kraken, especially with them able to turn around the momentum of the game after things looked like they could be getting out of hand and ugly early with those back-to-back goals quickly from Minnesota, even with one of them getting called back correctly. So coming into the second period with full momentum and 4 minutes of power play, now it was really time for Seattle to lay it on. That said, as we start the second period with that Kraken power play, how do I put this? They haven't looked nearly as good as the penalty kill has. Now, it does have to be said that during this first 4-minute double minor power play that the Kraken have to start at the second period, they are able to create a number of chances, but can't make a difference where it matters on the scoreboard, and you really don't want to be wasting too many of those 4-minute power play opportunities. The one good thing to come out of it is that they are able to capture that momentum and keep it going as the second period gets started, and coming out of it, even without getting any goals on the power play, they still continue to maintain that pressure on the Wild. And all of that builds up to the best series of the game for the Kraken, where they're able to hold the offensive zone for an extended period of time, getting shot after shot after shot on Talbot. And while again, he is absolutely standing on his head and making save after save, the Wild just aren't able to get the puck out of their zone and get that change that they desperately need. While the Kraken do eventually get a change off, even keeping the puck in the offensive zone, and with fresh legs, it's Fleury picking the puck up on the blue line, taking a fake slap shot, wrapping around the defenseman, gets a shot off at a hard angle, easy save for Talbot, but Fleury picks up the rebound going behind the net, wraps around and puts it into the net. It's 2 points Fleury, 1 point Wild. And just like that, not only does Hayden Fleury have his first 2 goals as a Kraken, his first multi-goal game of his entire NHL career, but he also leads the Kraken in defensive goals scored. At least for now anyway. And throughout the rest of the second period, the Kraken really don't let up pressure on the Wild at all, as they continue to mount up the shot count, eventually outshooting the Wild 12-4 in this period. And if you look at the Corsi graph of it, you can see that this was maybe the most dominant period of hockey that the Kraken have had all season, with really the only hiccup or downside of the entire period being the end of it where they finished on the power play. Now, yes, it's a little bit concerning, I guess you could say, that the power play of all things is where they looked like they were at their worst, but either way, they were dominating 5-on-5 play and had the lead going into the third. Now, coming into the third period, again, the Kraken have the lead, and when that's the case, as we've talked about as this early season has gone along, we've already seen a couple of different versions of this team. There's the one we saw on the road trip that would just go into its shell and put it all on Grubauer to close out the game, and then there's the one that we've seen so far in this homestand that continues to keep the pressure on and play for the most part like they had the rest of the game so far to that point. Now, that probably does play out somewhere in the middle of those two in this game, though I think it's much closer to how they played against the Habs, just with a better team on the other side of the ice. Throughout the period, at least 5-on-5, it was pretty back and forth with no huge swings in momentum either way. It does have to be said, though, with the Kraken, they were clearly much more cautious with the puck when they had it, and not trying too many risky passes across the ice like they might try earlier in the game to try and create opportunities. And defensively, while they didn't regress fully to what we had seen on the road trip with them just letting offenses skate them down into their end of the ice for free, they were a little bit more cautious with their checking of the puck and making sure that they weren't going to let anybody get behind them. Still a little bit safer than maybe you'd want to see them playing with just a 1-goal lead, but they were able to make it work here, and they still weren't playing that full turtle mode that we saw on the road trip. That having been said though, after having been a spectator for most of the second period, this third period was absolutely the Philipp Grubauer show. And that was never more obvious than when the Kraken, about halfway through the period, end up having to go on the penalty kill when Fleury makes his one big mistake of the game, with a bit of a knucklehead move pushing a loose stick away from a Minnesota player, which you're not allowed to do, that gets him called for interference. And on the power play, it's Grubauer making save after save as Minnesota is desperately trying to get this game tied, knowing that this might be their last best chance to do that. Though it does have to be said, he does also get a little bit of help from his two best friends, the posts on either side of him, as both of them end up making saves during this power play, both on Eriksson Ek, who had a couple of really prime opportunities right next to the net, but ends up getting robbed both times. And so, once again, this time very much on the back of Grubauer, the penalty kill does its job, and the Kraken maintain their 2-1 lead, where, again, it will stay until about 2 minutes left. The Wild pull Talbot, and the Kraken start getting their empty net chances. First one coming from Yanni Gourde, who gets robbed by Matt Dumba on a very nice diving play, but it doesn't take too long for Tanev to end up back in the offensive zone with the puck, and he does find the back of the net, his 6th of the season and second empty netter, having both of the empty netters in Kraken franchise history to this point, though that would not last very long, as with seconds left, Giordano from the defensive zone banks one off the side and all the way to the other end and into the net, reminding everybody that you probably don't want to play him in a game of pool and bet too much money on it. So once again, it's back-to-back wins for the Kraken, winning this one 4-1, though it is a little bit less decisive of a win than they had against the Canadiens, even though I do think this final score is a little bit more reflective of the overall play in the game. Again, it's just largely thanks to the goaltending that this one wasn't uglier than it was for Minnesota. As for the 3 stars, I don't think it's any big surprise here. It's Fleury with 2 goals getting the first star, and then the 2 goaltenders with Grubauer getting the second, and Talbot getting the third, and definitely earning it. And for the Kraken with this game, even outside of getting a big statement win against a good team, this just continues to further prove that they have looked night and day like a different team at home than they did, especially at the end of the road trip. Offensively, a lot of that has been driven by the addition of Yanni Gourde, who only played in that last game in New Jersey, where he was really the only bright spot for the Kraken. It also is helped out by the fact that they have been able to have some more consistent lines over especially the last couple of games, that has clearly allowed a little bit more chemistry to develop on the offensive end of things. At least to me though, the biggest difference for this team from the road trip to now has been on the defensive end of the ice, where during the road trip they were constantly allowing odd man rushes, allowing the opposing players to just skate freely into the defensive zone for the Kraken, and getting high quality shooting chances, especially allowing way too much opposing pressure in front of the net. Where now in this homestand, they have not only made it much more difficult for teams to get into the offensive zone against the Kraken, but they've also kept those shots much more to the outside and limited those high danger scoring chances, which definitely makes Grubauer's job much easier and is why his save percentage has started going back up. Especially in this game, I can only think of a couple of times where I saw a Wild player that was allowed to skate freely into the defensive zone without too much of a challenge from a Kraken player, which is really only something that we saw the Kraken challenging at the blue line like that maybe a couple of times per game during that road trip, and maybe not at all during the Philly game. And when you make it hard for a team to enter the zone like that, it forces them to do more dump and chase and fight for the puck along the boards, which is something the Kraken have been pretty good at to this point in the season. It also helps limit some of those open ice free shots that we were seeing constantly during the road trip that put the goaltender in all sorts of tough situations for a number of different reasons and create those high scoring chances. Limiting those helps out the goaltender, helps him to get more in a flow of the game, and ultimately that is why we're seeing a much harder team to score on now than we were during that road trip. And of course, it was also very encouraging to see the Kraken able to play this style of game against a team like Minnesota. It's one thing to do it against a struggling team like the Habs were when they came in, but again, to do it against a team that was coming in 5-1 and undefeated on the road, that is a whole nother thing and a great game for the Kraken. With that said, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below. And of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this game down in the comments section and some excitement for this first mini winning streak in franchise history. Until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, and go Kraken.